Robert Spence. I've been a nurse for 31 years until approximately April 1st. After cardiac surgery, I'm done. After what I experienced as a traveling COVID nurse, bedside nurse, between January 20th and approximately April 1st, I had told my wife, I'm not going back if they paid me a lot more than the $120 an hour I was making. Not after what happened to me on January the 20th of this year. They gave antibiotics, breathing treatments, and steroids for 18 years for bacterial pneumonia. No matter what brought them in, inflammation was the enemy, they explained to me. Inflammation is the enemy. Antibiotics and steroids and breathing treatments, which was steroidal breathing treatments. And they said, you've got to mobilize these patients. If they don't get up in the chair, and you don't get them up on the bedside commode chair, and you don't start walking them to the bathroom, if you just let them lay in the bed, the horse that lays down stays down. You've got to get your patient moving. So nursing, PTOT, we got them patients up. Our nursing assistants, we got them patients up. We got them moving, which they could much more readily clear their secretions. They ate better, they felt better, they did better, they used their ice and flutter, and we would get them out of there 7 to 10 days. And so when all this COVID stuff started, I was the biggest COVID believer there ever was. How bad it was, how virulent it was. This is serious stuff. I took this very seriously. I believed in all the scientists. And I believed in what we did was, what we were doing was helping. And I also loved my patients and loved all of them. We want them to get out of there, and we did. So I'm on a COVID unit in Anderson. I gave remdesivir to this guy, and he was Hispanic. They don't complain. They're very stoic. So this guy, within an hour, he starts crackling. I could hear him from the doorway. And I knew that was flash pulmonary edema. I can't say that, I'm a nurse. But I can go to the nurse practitioner in this case and say, you might want to look at him. He's looking bad. And she got to the doorway and could hear it, and she come out and she said, 40 Lasix stat, and push him to the ICU. I didn't know why. I'd just given him remdesivir. It's an antiviral. It's supposed to make him better. I just thought, well, he's just turning bad. I didn't understand what remdesivir could do as far as flash pulmonary edema, increasing your inflammation and your response to inflammation. So I took 3 weeks off, did all my paperwork, went travel nursing, COVID nursing, full-time COVID nursing, Lexington Hospital. When I got there, I said, and we're going to do the convalescent plasma. And she said, manager, she said, no, they've quit doing that. I said, why? She said, that's dead in 2 days, average. I was like, wow, well, I'm glad y'all are seeing the light, recognizing what's not working, and making the difference for our patients. Thank goodness y'all saw the light and quit doing that. You've tried it, it don't work, I get it. Now what do we do? And they said, get to it. So my first week there, I had some really, really bad COVID patients on high-flow oxygen. They'd said they had been there 3 to 4 weeks. I said, can you get up? Can you sit up? My reflexes get you up. They said, I can't even take the mask off long enough to put a spoon up to my face for a second, and my sats go down to 70. These people are in stage. Yes, they're not on the ventilator, but I'm telling you, their white counts were good. Their bacteria was over, but their lungs are shot from 3-4 weeks of bacterial pneumonia that just eats their lungs up. There's no available lung surface left for oxygen exchange. No CO2 oxygen can go on through scar tissue. That's why they can't get off the high flow. That's why they go to the ventilator and can't get off, because their diaphragms are weak. They're laying there, they're sedated. You got a tube in everywhere, and they make a couple of extra. The ventilator is a death spiral down. So once you get on the ventilator, you're that bad, you're probably not going to come off the ventilator. But the high flow people couldn't come off either. Even though they were stabilized on high flow, they couldn't come off all that stuff. And if you move them when they've been there 3 weeks laying in the bed. And I asked them, I said, have you been getting up? They said, you're the first person that's tried to get me up. You're the first person that's tried to get me up. Yes, PT and OT was ordered. But they go in there, and the patients would whine and say, I feel bad, I feel bad. Okay, mark you down for refused. We'll do some bed mobility, but we're not going to mobilize you because you feel bad. So it's partly the patient's fault. They want to roll in there, lay in the bed, and get better. You can't do that. And as a pulmonary nurse, we would all really push these patients up and get them going. But for our COVID patients, we were encouraged to limit our exposure. We were encouraged to group our care. I talked to one COVID nurse, not at this last hospital, but other COVID nurses. They said, oh, that's a great idea. I won't catch it. I thought, that's great. And so my first week in Columbia, I had my head down doing my thing, IVs, pills, in and out of the room, putting all this stuff on, PAPR, etc., following protocol. I didn't want to catch it. When I got off from work, I stripped down to my underwear and Crocs and went home. Okay? Second week there. Well, instead of 38 patients, we have 30. Next week, 24, 25. Next week, 15, 16. I said, wow, where's COVID going? They said, oh, well, it's just, so we're going to stay empty, 15 beds out of 38? And this is a COVID unit, bin COVID unit. All rooms were negative pressures. The hallways were built negative pressure. They didn't convert it. It was built that way. So if COVIDs are going to come into this hospital, this is probably the best place to put them. I said, but what are y'all going to do with all these 15 empty rooms? Well, we're going to take all the COVIDs and put them on one end, and this whole other end of the hall, we're going to designate that regular patients. I said, all regular patients, not COVID? They said, we're going to hold 7 just in case COVID comes back. I said, cool. So the next week, we dropped to like 7 or 8 COVIDs. I said, wow. Out of 38, we're down to 7. I said, where did COVID go? This is great. And they said, yeah, you're going to have more regular patients, cardiac, GI bleeders, stuff like that. I said, great. Next week, we dropped down to 2 or 3. And I said, you got to be kidding me. Something's going on. And that's when I found out that on January the 20th, roughly, the CDC guidelines recommended that we roll the PCR cycling from the high 30s to 28, like it was originally designed to do. And then it hit me. And I lost sleep over it. I was having chest pain over it. And it woke me up in the middle of the night, like hit me hard. I could not sleep. I tossed and turned because my first week or two there, I didn't do it. I didn't lead them to the gate, but I'm the guy that euthanized people. They call it comfort care. But when you get to the point you can't take high flow off, you get so upset you ain't seen your family except maybe an iPad in weeks, and you're never going to come off the high flow. And the doctor says, you've done your best, but this is going to be it for you. And so the patients get all teary-eyed and upset, and they call in the palliative team, and they all hold their hand and cry, and they said, but we can keep you comfortable. Here comes Albert. He's got the morphine and Ativan, and I load him up and take off the high flow, and they gasp themselves to death. And I'm the guy that's pushing the button, like in the gas chambers at Auschwitz. No, I didn't lead them there. And honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. I just do what I'm told. But after January the 20th, and then on into February 1st or so, I saw what changing the PCR did on my floor. And then I saw what I had not done for my COVID patients. And then I was also greatly encouraged, don't move them unless their SATs are above 90. Don't move them. I was like, but I've always been told, get them up and get them going. No, wait till their SATs are high 90s to move them. And I'm like, no, they can tolerate a minute or two down in the low 80s. Get them up, make them move, make them set up, and then they will learn to breathe deeper, and we can wean them off the oxygen. No, their focus was put them on more oxygen. I said, okay. Then I realized where our mistake is. Yes, early treatments, the HCQ, the ivermectin, real smart. Man, give them at least Tamiflu. But when the PCR cycling changed, I'm telling you, it was a big change on my floor. Yes, COVID's real, but so is flu A. And how many of these COVID cases were really flu with this fake, false, faulty PCR cycling cranked up to I don't know what? Fauci even said back in July of 2020 in this Virology Weekly podcast live, he said a PCR over 35 is absolute false. You're not going to get correct data. You're going to be giving out misinformation. He said that back in July of 2020. The CDC said crank that PCR up to 40. That's what they did all of 2020 to generate all this giant pandemic and fear that kept me afraid of going in my rooms and doing anything but grouping my care. That's what brought us all this fear. This pandemic is the PCR cycling. I'm telling you, it's the PCR is the elephant in the room. Yes, COVID's real, but we got to jump on this like we've always jumped on upper respiratory infections. I'm out of it, though. It's over. It don't matter anymore. And then here comes Delta. The same PCR that was giving us a pandemic in 2020 falsely is the same PCR that took it away when they cut the cycling down to 28 on the 20th, per the CDC guidelines. Now the same PCR that's going to be changed out for a multiplex whatever at the end of this year, the same PCR is now giving us Delta, Zeta, Lambda, whatever. I don't think so. I don't trust them because I know they can't let it go away because Pfizer's got 1 million doses they want to stick to us. 1 billion doses they want to stick to us. For what reason? What's their motive? And what's there any connection between the CDC, CEOs, and Pfizer's? They're switching CEOs back and forth like it's commonplace, and there's no conflict of interest there between the CDC and the FDA and Pfizer or any other big drug companies. And I also know secondhand information that why did Pfizer get FDA approved? Not JJ, not Moderna. Come to find out, I know somebody on the inside indirectly. They said Pfizer gave the most money to the lobbyist. And what do the lobbyists do with that money? They gave the money to the lobbyists, and the lobbyists lobbied their case to the FDA. And what they're doing with the money, I have no idea. But it's awful suspicious to me that Pfizer gave the most money, and the lobbyists make it happen. And these COVID death shots, I know of at least a couple of people who's paralyzed, waist down. Hope they're getting better. And paresthesia. Look at Senator Ron Johnson's video where he interviews people that have been hurt by the shot. It's happening. People are dying from the shot. I got COVID nurse friends that say, yep, they said they took the shot 2 days ago and they've had a heart attack, they've had a stroke, they have thrombocytopenia, and they get all kind of nerve weird stuff going on, and they die. And a lot just, and I'll tell you something else that was big going on between the COVID I took care of versus my 18 years. Our patients, if they weren't getting better, meaning their oxygen's demand wasn't going down, we weren't weaning that oxygen down because they were resistant to what we was doing, or if we started going up on their oxygen, something's not going the right way. We consulted pulmonology. Pulmonology would go in there and order a slew more tests, usually repeat blood gases, chest x-rays, CTs, and they do a bronchoscopy. I was told back in 2020 when I was at my old hospital, we don't do bronchs on COVID patients. I said, why? We do so many bronchs here. They try to do a bronch on me. Everybody gets a bronch. Just hold your hand up. They'll do a bronch. No bronchs for COVID. Why? Oh, it'll aerosolize it in the bronch lab. I said, okay. Well, I got to Columbia. Yeah, sure enough, I've never heard of anybody getting a bronch. Never. What does a bronch do? It sucks out some junk. They get a culture to make sure they're on the right antibiotic, which sometimes resulted in the doctors going, yeah, it's not staph, it's not strep. It's, in this case, fungal. Switch their antibiotics altogether. But at least cleaning them out, give the antibiotic a foothold chance to get them going. And then, what do you know? We're weaning their oxygen down. It always helped them, these bronchs. We can't do bedside bronchs anymore. We can't do bronchs in the bedside with negative pressure even, with disposable bronch tubes. Nope. No one gets a bronch when you have COVID. That, to me, is the way we used to treat respiratory patients, the way we're treating now. That is murder. Withholding care is murder. And I got a lot of COVID nurses and friends that are saying the same thing, but they can't speak out because they still have a house payment. And they're really upset about this. Thank you.